Today I want to talk about elemental effects in games. I've recently been replaying Borderlands 2, and I've started a playthrough as Maya, who's the siren in that game. And I decided to play as her because I wanted to do an elemental build. Because she's got a whole bunch of abilities that let her make corrosive clouds and deal bonus fire damage and a whole bunch of fancy stuff to do with the elements. And I hadn't really played that kind of character before in Borderlands. I'd always just been a straight out and out let's deal tons of damage. So I figured let's give the elemental thing a try, see how it goes. And I had a lot of fun with it. And it got me thinking, why don't more games have better elemental stuff? And at first I thought, oh, there's none, but there is. Borderlands 2, though, has a very well done elemental system. There's fire, which does bonus damage to flesh. There's corrosive, which does bonus damage to robots. Shock, which does bonus damage to shields. Explosive, which is just a lower bit of bonus damage towards everything. And there's also the slag element, where you slag an enemy and then a non-slag based weapon does extra bonus damage. I think it's normally double damage, but it varies depending on the mode you're playing. On top of that, if you use fire for a robot, it does less damage. And if you use corrosive for a human flesh based enemy, it does less damage. So you've got to use the right elemental type for the enemy you're facing, which makes it an interesting way to play the game and means certain weapons are better in certain scenarios, instead of there just being the standard thing that you get in a lot of multiplayer shooters where there's just one god gun that everyone uses because it's the best, because everything's just basic stats. But sticking to open world games, like I'm supposed to in the series, sorry, I've been playing a lot of multiplayer shooters recently, so I occasionally go off in tangents. But anyway, back to multiplayer games. The one element that's always... not multiplayer, open world side, come on, focus. Yep. The one element that is always common in pretty much any open world game you find, there's going to be a few which don't have it, but most of them will have fire. Fire is something we're so used to seeing. Even if it's not done as a specific damage type, there's just fire you can stand, and there's campfires, there's lanterns on fire, there's buildings on fire, there's fire. And 9 times out of 10, you'll either expect it to deal you damage if you stand in it, or you'll stand in it and go, oh, why doesn't this deal damage? Fire should deal damage to me. And it will deal fire damage, which might just be the same as normal damage for all concerns, but sometimes it is its own specific element. Now, Skyrim has fire, frost, and shock magic, and those do have their own effects. There's only 3 real damage types in there, but they each do more or less damage depending on the enemy they're facing. So there is an elemental effect in Skyrim. And depending on the enemy, you might want to switch up your magic. I've played pure mage builds before, where I specifically haven't gone just for one magic type, because it doesn't work well against all enemies. Conversely, with my best pyromancer build, when I went up against a burnt spriggan, that was a real tough fight, because I basically just had to staggerlock the creature and let Teldrin kill it, because I couldn't deal anywhere near enough damage because all of my attacks were fire-based at the time. Now, Fallout 4 is another big game I've covered a lot, so I figured I should touch on it. That has fire damage, with stuff like the Shish Kebab and the Flamer, but that's just damage over time more than anything. It also has poison damage, something we see very rarely and practically is never used. Like, you'll get hit by maybe a rad scorpion or a stingwing and suffer a bit of poison damage. That's what we're used to. But actually, for using poison damage as the player, that doesn't happen a lot. Whenever I get a poison resistance or extra poison damage legendary drop, I'm always a little bit disappointed, because it just doesn't matter all that much in the game. There are, however, some different damage types we see all the time. Ballistic and energy damage, which isn't quite a me elemental thing, but I figured it was worth giving a quick mention, because it does show that games still try to do different damage types, just to vary it up a bit. Because if you do just have all basic flat numbers that deal X amount of damage, regardless of enemy type, regardless of any situation, it gets a bit boring, to be honest. Also, I've been playing Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning a lot. I've done the Permadeath series, which if you're not watching you should be, it's going quite well. I recorded another episode this morning. I've noticed that there's a whole bunch of different elemental damages there as well. And some of them really are cool, like ice damage seems to actually have a bit of slowing effect. Fire I've been using a lot, especially on some of the woodland things I've been facing. There's like tree-based creatures which have been causing me pain, but if I burn them a lot, it does a lot of bonus damage. And it's nice to see elemental attacks making the game just more fun to play. Because I don't want to just charge in constantly with my one sword and just use that and think, okay, this is how I'm going to kill things. I just stab it till it dies. Yep, I deal 10 damage. It's got 100 health. I just attack it 10 times and I win. That is boring. But if I think, oh wait, this is a plant-based enemy, how about I try using my fire abilities here? That will probably kill it quicker. Or if I think, oh, I don't know what that type of enemy is, let's try a few different elemental attacks, see which ones it resists, see which ones seem to do critical damage, see how that all goes. It makes it much more interesting. And unlike Borderlands 2, the game doesn't have to spell it out for you. Borderlands 2 has a specific quest where Marcus tells you about the elemental types and what they're good for. But even when the game doesn't spell it out for you, we're all kind of accustomed to elemental damage, to at least enough of an extent that we know that it will do differing effects to differing enemies most of the time. So you can just kind of play games, see what works, and see how you like it. But with some games it's obviously not going to make as much of a difference as with others. Borderlands 2 has elemental effects as a huge impact on the game. If you're playing in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, you pretty much have to have a slag-based weapon to deal with some enemies, because it's a huge game changer in that. And also if you're going up against robots and you have all fire weapons, you're really putting yourself at a huge disadvantage. Something like Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning though, I can still take down a lot of enemies with weapons that either don't have elemental damage or where the elemental damage is one that's resisted, because I can just vary up my attacks and keep doing basic physical damage over and over. I can rely on physical damage more than anything else, so I don't need to worry about it. However, I've been rambling a bit, and I should probably get to asking you guys questions, because I do want to have this be a bit of a question-focused one. Originally it was going to be me saying Borderlands 2 is the best at this, why don't other games do it? But then I realised other games do it, but maybe not as well. So the question I want to ask for you is, which game that you've played do you think has the best elemental system in place? For me, the answer is going to be Borderlands 2. Borderlands the pre-sequel technically had more elements, but the game overall just wasn't really quite as good. So Borderlands 2 is my vote for the best elemental game. What's yours? Feel free to tell me, especially if it's one I've not heard of or one that I might have overlooked. Because when I was first writing down notes for this, I didn't instantly think of Skyrim. Skyrim was something where I only kind of thought slightly afterwards, oh yeah, there's the elemental things in that. Because it's very easy to push them to the back of your mind. However, there's one more question, which is how much do you really care about elements being in games? Sure, fire's going to be in there if it's a medieval game, you need campfires and the like, but does it matter that there's specific fire damage, or are you alright with it just being, oh, this is going to, deal a tiny bit of damage to me, but it's just standard base damage? Do you think it really changes the game that much, and does it matter at all for you? Let me know in the comments below. Additionally, hit the like button if you enjoyed this episode. I want to do more discussion stuff on Wanderer Wednesdays because it's a nice little platform to do it. Also, I'll be getting onto the Fallout 76 grind before too long, just about 3 or 4 weeks till I'm starting on that, so expect to see a lot of Fallout 76 in this series. As always though, thanks for watching. Sarge out.